Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, it's now been a solid week since the release of Season 2 in Diablo 4, and as things have settled in and settled down, you may be wondering how the dust has settled when it comes to build and class strength so far in Season 2. The biggest surprise of all, Sorcerer is winning hard, and barely anyone expected that before actually playing the season, and even that in itself is a massive shakeup. Sorcerer has always been an extremely popular class, but this is the first time in Diablo 4, at least, that it has had a build with the power level to actually match its popularity. Unlike Season 1, there is a good variety in vampiric powers in use between the different classes, though you will definitely notice some overlapping patterns based on the playstyles of these builds, as there are just some combo synergies between powers and concepts for builds that really benefits those more than anything else. That said, today is all about the best build for each of the 5 classes and how the meta seems to have shifted in Diablo 4 for Season 2, keeping in mind that patch 1.2.1 is likely hitting in a couple of weeks and could shift things a little bit, but stay safe in the knowledge that if 1.2.1 changes any of this, it will be because it buffed something into being better, because we have official confirmation that nothing in Season 2 is planned to be nerfed. All that out of the way then, let's start off with the Sorcerer. If you've done any open world activities and seen a Sorcerer running around, you probably know exactly what this is going to be, and it's the Ball Lightning build, which was brought into stronger position in patch 1.2 in general, but the vampiric powers affect an insane amount as well. At its core though, this is realistically an unstable currents Arclash build, based on the same core concepts as Arclash builds have been in previous game versions, but this one takes advantage of a couple of really major things to go over. The main thing here is Ball Lightning. Its initial enhancement gives it bonus damage equal to 200% of your bonus attack speed. Before Season 2, that wasn't really a crazy amount, but in Season 2, you can buff your attack speed to ridiculous numbers, which then reaches a crazy point of making Ball Lightning do insane damage on every single tick, not to mention the buff to the gravitational aspect, further increasing the skill's damage. From there are 2 ways to take advantage of this. You can either play it like most other classes would, spend mana on Ball Lightning, have a bunch of mana cost reduction stats on your gear, but in my opinion, that is much weaker than going full in on Unstable Currents and Arclash. If you get as many instances of cooldown reduction on your gear as possible, get yourself the new unique Flicker Step boots to reduce ultimate cooldown by evading through enemies, and the vampiric power is Anticipation and Hectic as well, and you'll wind up with Unstable Currents resetting its own cooldown before it even ends. Having 100% uptime on Unstable Currents means that you can proc Ball Lightning naturally and consistently just by spamming Arclash as your basic skill, and that brings us back to the way that this build used to work. Attack speed stacking Unstable Currents buffed Arclash, and attack speed stacking has never been easier than with our current vampiric powers. The big one of these being Ravenous, which gives you a pretty high lucky hit chance to increase your attack speed equal to 40% of your total movement speed. If you reach maximum movement speed in this game, that would be 200%, which makes Ravenous give you 80% bonus attack speed. Combine that with Moonrise giving you bonus attack speed as well, and damage while using basic skills too, like, Arclash, and then suddenly you can be easily above 100% bonus attack speed, which not only triggers more spells like Ball Lightning by having you cast Arclash more often, but also increases the damage of Ball Lightning even further due to the enhancement we talked about earlier. This is the absolute peak that Sorcerer has reached in any season, insane levels of damage, surprisingly tanky as well, and it's easily number 1 for this class currently, though of course Josh is working his magic and he may have some ways to improve this even further, coming out soon on the channel. Second up then, let's talk about the Rogue. Rogue is in an awesome position this season, just as it has been since the release of the game, honestly. Arguably the best balanced of all 5 classes since the start, it has just seen very few changes to the overall class, and that's because consistently there are a number of different, fun, and incredibly strong and viable builds. That said, if I had to choose only one at the top, it would probably be what you expect, which is Twisting Blades. Twisting Blades has always been at the top of the pile in some form or another for Rogue, but the only things that have ever held it back, which is sort of a weird thing to say considering again it's always been top tier, is attack speed. The faster that you can attack, the more damage you can do with this build. The faster you can get your blades in, the faster you can trigger various effects and resets, and it's just sort of beautiful with this kind of attack speed, entirely a result of vampiric powers as well. Most specifically, the Ravenous power, again, just like the Sorcerer build we mentioned, Twisting Blades Rogue, and honestly most Rogue builds love attack speed more than most other stats, and so Ravenous providing just a ridiculous amount of attack speed is silly. Combine that then with the Undying power for the insane healing that it provides with high attack speed, and then merge that even further by using the Temerity unique pants if you want to, and you can become nigh unkillable by anything reasonable, healing for 3% of your max health every time that you attack, attacking at silly speeds in general, and then any healing healing done over your maximum translates into a barrier that can be up to 80% of your health in size, and continues refreshing every time you attack. Combine that with Prey on the Weak and Metamorphosis, and then suddenly you don't even need Shadow Step in your build because you have a constant, consistent source of Unstoppable, which makes space for even more flexibility with your skill set. It is just extremely solid, and while you can specialize Rogue into things in a more King of Single Target, King of Pure AoE type thing if you want to go with other builds, this one specifically and its variants are the best Rogue build right now as an all-rounder. After that then, let's talk about the Necromancer and how it's looking for this class in Season 2, and here comes the part where I get to say something fun. The best Necromancer build in Season 2 is not Bone Spear. They did it. They officially, through a combination of nerfing Bone Spear and buffing other things, made something else stronger. It is something that was already a really high contender even before Season 2, which is shadow-based Blood Mist builds, often referred to as Infinimist because the idea is to stay in your invulnerable mist form as much as physically possible, auto-popping corpses for massive shadow damage using the Shadow Blight key passive to combo that even further to be even more damage, pile on cooldown reduction on as much of your gear as possible, which lets you keep your Blood Mist uptime very high, not to mention Bone Storm, which you can activate frequently as well, which is just insane damage in its own right, but then we add on Vampiric powers. You've got stuff like Metamorphosis for more Unstoppable, and Vampiric Curse application, which is important, not to mention things like Anticipation to reduce the cooldown of Bone Storm by a silly amount before you even start to work on your active cooldown reduction within fighting. Then add on your new unique ring, Zafal's, which gives you a lucky hit chance for enemies affected by your damage over time effects to explode for an insane amount of damage, and this procs super frequently when pretty much every bit of your damage that you do is damage over time. The result of this is a build with the same insane survivability that this had before Season 2, as it always has just been the tankiest Necromancer build choice, but now with insanely higher damage than it used to have too, especially when you consider that crit and vulnerable were nerfed when they refilled the damage buckets, and part of that is the result that damage over time effects, you know, things that cannot crit, are much better in comparison to crit builds now. So this just sort of shot up into the stratosphere of power with all that put together. Then we have Druid, and things are pretty interesting here in my opinion too. There are two builds really worth talking about when mentioning the absolute strongest Druid builds right now in Season 2. The first one is Pulverized. It's a classic. Everyone knows Pulverized. It hasn't really changed much, except for the fact that Overpower is a lot stronger than it used to be. Otherwise, it's just normal Pulverize. But the one that I think is even better than that is often called Stormclaw. This is the concept of using the Great Staff of the Crone's Unique, which makes your Claw also cast Stormstrike. Basically, every basic skill cast now casts a second basic skill, and with some of the other stuff that we've talked about seasonally until now, you can probably see where this is going to go. The build focuses on gaining insane attack speed, and it completely ignores core skills. Generally, the best version of this uses the Nature's Fury key passive to proc random spells on nature magic hits, so essentially like Unstable Currents and Arclash for Sorcerer, but the Druid version. But then we also use the Symbiotic aspect to make those procs reduce all of our other cooldowns as well. Petrify is a fantastic ultimate for this build, especially with all the cooldown reductions that we get too. Hurricane is great just for constant damage output and damage reductions. Cyclone Armor is just for lovely resistances passively, which actually matter a lot now in Season 2. Earthen Bulwark is insanely good with this kind of symbiotic resetting play style, and then the last slot of this player that they're running is actually Ravens, but you will often instead see something like Bloodhowl, mostly for the attack speed. It is mostly personal choice for that one though. This is a style of build that has been around for Druid for quite a bit, but only now is taking a top spot due to, again, the Vampiric powers, which will feel quite familiar. Metamorphosis to apply Vampiric Curse, Moonrise, and Ravenous for massive attack speed boost, which is a big deal for this build. Undying to make you near unkillable because of that attack speed, and then just Hectic to reduce cooldowns even further while spamming your basic skills. It is just absolutely incredibly strong, and in my opinion, the strongest Druid build that we have so far this season, though Druid is keeping it extremely close between a few things, including Pulverize, which I mentioned earlier, and even Shred builds too. This is just the one at the tippity top right now. Then finally today, let's talk about the Barbarian. This class has received a fair bit of love in the last couple of patches, but more than anything, it has just sort of thrown it into a weird disarray. The class is still strong, and its strongest builds are still pretty solid, but generally what you'll find right now in Season 2 is that Barbarian's absolute peak is lower than the other classes, but that its build variety within that peak is substantially better than it used to be for Barbarian. Before, you only really had two choices if you wanted to be doing your best actual ability with a Barbarian, and one of them was a bug. Now you have a good 3 or 4 choices, which are all nearly equal power, and not a single one that's based on bugs at all. Honestly, I've had a really hard time choosing only one of these as the best, as they're so damn close. In case you're wondering, it's generally between Upheaval Barb, variations of Walking Arsenal Barb, and a good old fan favorite, Hammer of the Ancients, but in a much more interesting way than it used to be. And at this very moment, I am leaning towards Hammer of the Ancients. This used to be the best Barbarian build in a prior incarnation, but that was based pretty much entirely around a bug. It was still very good, good even without the bug, but when the bug happened, it would increase the damage exponentially, and so people would abuse that bug, and that was why the build was what it was before. Now that bug is fixed though, but the big difference bringing this back into the forefront anyways is, well, overpower. With the way that damage buckets were changed this season, guaranteed overpower is as strong as critical hits or vulnerable, if not arguably even stronger, and so Barbarians being able to force overpower became a much bigger deal. Combine that with the fact that you can predict Barb's overpower procs to specifically only use them on your Hammer of the Ancients for your big damage numbers, and then combine that further with the new Banished Lord's Talisman Unique for a massive multiplier when you both crit and overpower on the same hit, and that's why Hammer of the Ancients is still capable of doing just millions and millions and millions of damage in a single hit, even now that it has been fixed up. Not to mention the way that Barb just naturally synergizes with a few vampiric powers. Hemomancy is exceptional on Barbarian. It is great for a lot of classes, but Barbarian as a class tends to have a higher average health pool than most, and thus scales better with this power long term. The other more unique vampiric power that I see this using though is actually Blood Boil. This gives you a little mini game after hitting an overpower on a core skill, and also gives you a guaranteed overpower once every 20 seconds, which is quite strong in this style of build. All in all, the top Barbarian builds are pretty dang close to each other, but I'm quite impressed that even after being nerfed hard, very hard honestly, Hammer of the Ancients has found another way to shoot itself up into being at the height of relevance even then. And that just about does it for today then, everyone. The current best build for each class in Season 2 of Diablo 4. Of course, I did my research, I have my knowledge of the different classes, but at the end of the day, I made some choices. These are my opinions, and in a lot of cases, there are now in Season 2 a secondary or tertiary build for most classes that are almost 99% as good as the actual best ones, so just because I don't mention your favorite build here doesn't mean that it's bad. It could actually be extremely good. I just think that the ones that I've mentioned are simply better. I hope you've enjoyed this video then, and I hope that you've enjoyed getting a look into the peak of every class in Diablo 4 right now. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.